Well, greetings, Minecrafters, and welcome to another exciting discussion with goats. They're actually mating goats. I'm hoping this doesn't get, like a little embarrassing. Hamlet there is fixed, but the other two, not doing a lot of behavior. Okay, so, regroup. All right, so we are about to have an exciting conversation, another Minecraft conversation. I'm Dr. Kimberly Quinn, and it is my privilege and honor to be this sort of have this role of helping people become the boss of their brain, the boss of their thoughts, because thoughts come first and feelings come second, and then behavior or action third. So basically, our thoughts dictate our lives, really, if you want to sum it right up in a nutshell. So learning how to control thoughts and what we allow in, actually changes our lives, for real. By the way, I've been pushing for therapy goats at Champlain because they greatly reduce anxiety, except when they get loose when I'm in a meeting. Then it's not so much, but most of the time it is, definitely. Okay, so today we're going to talk about connected disconnection or disconnected connection, or I don't know, that's what's happening. So really the whole social media thing and where we are now, because before the Rona, right, this was already the current young adult generation was already the most anxious and depressed the United States has ever seen, right? That was already the case. Then enter the Rona pandemic, and they already got, they got even more glued to their devices because that was all we had. Even me, who's not, anybody who knows me knows how I'm not a fan of cell phones at all. I've been kind of forced to check it a little bit, professionally, but sometimes days go by, and my excuse, which is real, it's real, is that we don't get good service out here. So when I'm at the house, I really can't always check it anyway. But that said, I was even grateful for technology when, say hi, King Lear. Oh, there he goes. I was even grateful for technology during the Rona because it's all we had. It's all we had. And so, if we remember, we even had had jam-packed Zoom meetings all day long. We got Zoom fried, right? Then many of us held like Zoom happy hours and Zoom. I remember our son's birthday. One of our son's birthdays is in March. So the Rona 2020, right? Everybody's like in shock and scared and don't know what to do. And then we had this Zoom thing, to try to see family. And yes, was it good to, at that time, to have something? Yes, I would say it was the bless and the mess. And also blessed in the mess is with the Rona. Many of us, definitely our family included, did a lot. We had young adults home unexpectedly. They were out doing their thing, and then the Rona, they came back, and we were thrilled, and we did a lot of walks in the woods, so that was all good, positive stuff. That said, there's some positive stuff. A lot of it just went south, and I've seen it with, our own students just isolating. I've got also friends who are professors at other colleges, and what I'm saying and what they're sharing, it isn't different. And they're different size schools and everything. Like, this isn't different. And I know a lot of our students went from already, being glued to their phones before the Rona, glued to phones. Not saying that with judgment. If I am, I don't mean to, okay? It's their condition. They're conditioned because it's their generation. They feel this pressure to be, connected 24/7. It just buzzes, ding, zip, and then all of a sudden they're checking it, and there's an immediate mood change. We know that for sure. I did research on it just a few years ago. And in fact, the reason I did do research on that is I had asked one of my Minecraft, actually then it was positive psychology, this is years ago at this point, I had them just raise their hands. If this is way before the Rona, this is years ago, probably 8 years ago, maybe years ago. I asked them, this is a huge class, like 26 of them in there, which we don't usually do at Champlain, but I kept letting them in. Couldn't help it. And I said, so when you check your phone, it bings, zip, buzzes, dings, whatever it does, how many of you have a mood change? Didn't say positive or negative, and I clarified that. Just in general, you check it, and every hand, not one, did not go up. Every hand went up. So we know that. And then when the actual formal research started, what we found was, was bittersweet, I guess, because when people research, they obviously want to find what we set out to find, right? And which would be the validity piece. And we did, and the anxiety tool wasn't the best. Definitely we know that students are anxious. Anxiety numbers went way up. What else did we check for? Impulsivity, distractibility, because it's hard to separate those. That went up. Social media addiction went up. I'm trying to think. Oh, and then one of our biggest claims to fame, I think it was the biggest claim to fame, if I remember right, was that students' life satisfaction plummeted, which means that these young adults hated their lives. And we kept track of the number of hours, but that wasn't what we were measuring mostly. It was with this particular inventory we were using. It had all kinds of questions related to emotional investment and boredom and relationships, like in all kinds of questions. And so there was an overall thing that depression soared, and the social media addiction went, stuff soared, the impulsivity, distractibility went up, and also life satisfaction scale just tanked. And so I think we know this across the country, I'm sure across the world too. We'll just stick with the States for right now. We know that this was the case before the Rona, right? So my research was in 2018, so it just slid right in there. Then enter the Rona, and we're on our social media even more. Even those of us who, don't spend a lot of time on social media, it's even more so because we were all craving, connection. So now here's the big question of the day is, does this satisfy us? Does this really work as far as satisfying that most basic human need to be connected? And the answer is no, not really. Does it somewhat? Somewhat. Does it satisfy the whole thing? No, it does not. And we get into mirror neurons and all that. It's even different. I kind of think of it like the movie Twilight with the vampires, unless they got the real bite. That's like a really bad analogy, but that's what I'm thinking of. Like, it just wasn't satisfying. So do we get some connection? Yeah, but it's not the same, and we got very conditioned. I know that, and it's bigger than just the social media, because the isolation is a big piece of it. I watched our own students. I was on campus, and we tried everything we could to get them there. I had all kinds of draw, and out of a class of 20, I get maybe 3 to show up during that whole thing because they had a virtual choice. And even though they were like 100 feet from the classroom, and it's because they got conditioned. It was easier, especially in the winter semester. It's easier to stay in your jammies, stay 100 feet down the street, even though they needed so much to be there. And students were taking out food because of all the rules. That's just how it was at that point. So conditioned, obviously, is just like a fancier word for habit. And so a lot of isolation happened. I know for a fact that the mental health situation is currently, the anxiety and depression rates are way up there right now, significantly up there. We know that also, that's young adults, that's our young adults. And I also know that for grown-ups across the country, not just young adults, but across the country, that depression rates went up about 30% from pre-Rona to now. And that's just who's saying stuff, right? Because that's the only way it gets in the database. If somebody walks themselves over to a counseling center, yay and good for you, because you're taking care of yourself, or they're kept track of, through school counseling, something, right? But so that means that there's a lot of people who managed it somehow. They might look like they're holding it all together from the outside looking in, when they're exhausted holding that fort together, right? And they're depressed too. We don't even know about them. So chances are those rates are even higher, right? And so there's also a whole lot of, again, isolation going on. I call them dorm caves. And so that's on the college campus. Go out, get their takeout, back to the rooms they went, especially in the winter semester. Back to the rooms they went. And so this whole thing has gotten worse and worse and worse. And thank goodness we're back in person. We don't know how long that's going to last with the current situation. But for right now, there's been such a shift in the force with the buzz on campus, which is great. And I'm glad to see it because it's really starting to get me concerned, because we just aren't wired. Even the most introverted of us aren't wired to hide in a room with a computer all day long, carrying, having our relationships through electrons, through a wall, through the ground and the air and everything else. Like we're not meant for that, and it is not doing the same thing as human interaction. Um, there's no replacement for that. There's no substitute for genuine human connection to that degree. Again, yes, did it help some? Of course it did. Otherwise, we would have had no connection. It still didn't satisfy us. It's not enough. And so, the last thing I'll bring up here is how it can be a little bit of a heavy lift, even for more seasoned grown-ups. We've been so used to being virtual and so used to not getting out because we've been restricted because it's been a pandemic and it's been scary, with restaurants and everything. A lot of the simple pleasures that we all love to do. So it may take a heavier lift because we're so used to it to actually kind of nudge ourselves in the direction of genuine human connection because we do so need it. And so I know where I was going with this. Okay, the loneliness epidemic is kind of like a little sub thing, not little, big, of the pandemic, because we think, oh, so and so's lonely, so and so's lonely. That's huge, and we toss it around like it's not huge, and it is huge, and it's currently right up there with heart disease as one of the leading causes of death in this country. Loneliness is an epidemic. It's an epidemic, and now, just think about it. The reason that we're connected in a disconnected way is because of trauma, because the pandemic is a trauma. I had a colleague of mine say, oh, it's almost like it's a trauma. It's not like a trauma. It is a trauma. Like, it's a trauma. We know that it lands under the category of complex trauma, which the rest of the stuff from trauma comes along with it, right? Anxiety, depression, all the different little outlets. And then the fear and all this stuff. And so really, the whole point of this conversation is to, rarely are things polarized, like we say a lot. Is social media 100% bad? No. Are there rather gigantic detriments to it? Yes. And the more time spent on it, obviously that's worse. And then there's all the hours and hours and hours of video game watching and such. So the other thing with the social media, which is true for seasoned grown-ups too, but definitely more, middle school, high school, college age, is the social comparison. Which Leon Festinger, early 1950s, came up with that. So they're feeling that pressure, FOMO stuff, right? That pressure to stay connected 24/7. And there's just all this social comparison going on because they're measuring up their very real selves against the backdrop of make pretend land. It's make pretend land. Call it what it is, right? So-and-so's in a relationship and I'm not. So-and-so's parents were able to take them on a vacation after the Rona. We all know Airbnbs and all that were just popping all summer and into the fall. So-and-so got to go on a vacation with their family. So-and-so got into graduate school. So-and-so's able to be in person and my school isn't. So-and-so got the internship they wanted. So-and-so's school let them study abroad. Look at so-and-so is able to have friends over and pictures of all that fun that they're having. And it's all bullshit, okay? Because it's social media. You notice that people don't put up, pictures of themselves when they got a little pimple over here and they're in their sweatpants for like the third day in a row. That's not typically what we do, right? And we know, in fact, there's one, they better not go on the road. Hey, boys. There's a video I show, a piece of it. It's not the whole thing. From the documentary Run, Maddie, Run, if you've ever seen that. She was a freshman, I think, at UPenn. She had a track scholarship, and I think the other one was soccer. She ended up choosing to go to UPenn, and all these photos looked like she had the world by the ass. And she did, there's just pictures on, this is pre-Rona, this is I think 2014, don't quote me, but in that range. It's horribly tragic. She's got her arms around all these, beautiful young kids and, the beer cups and whatever else, and here she is, an athlete, and all this. And I want to say it was November. Anyway, she climbed 9 stories and took her life. And there were pictures plastered all over social media about all this great fun she's having. And she's at an Ivy League, and she's an athlete, and she's at all these parties. And she was gorgeous. And it's just an absolute tragedy. And I show it because it's so important to get this word out there that this is serious. It's really serious, because this isolation and this social comparison and this way of connecting and communicating, it's got some pretty huge detriments, and it can hide and mask loneliness and anxiety and depression. And now with the Rona, which does not want to seem to wrap things up, it hasn't gone away, and it's worse. And so the main reason for this video is, of course, awareness. And what happened with Maddie and all the people who were affected by the loss of this wonderful kid, this young lady. I mean, it's just so freaking tragic. Is that it's not a substitute for human connection. The internet is not a human being with a pulse that can hug you and talk to you and look you in the eye and all this stuff. And it just isn't a substitute. And so what we need to do is be aware. And remember, my good friend Dr. Dave likes to say that, and I actually had that on a t-shirt, come to think of it, that we can't do what we don't know, right? However, once we become aware, we become responsible. And we really need, especially those of us who are seasoned grown-ups and working with our own kids, obviously, and working with kids and young adults, whether it's as a counselor, an educator, a coach, or whatever, to really be on top of our game with this. Because now, at this very tender developmental stage that they're in, including college students, are half-baked bread too, because the prefrontal cortex for genetic males or genetic females is the same. It's 25 years old. So we still have quite a responsibility to really be paying attention and watching out for the loneliness thing, because just like with Maddie, it can be all but invisible, looking like everything's just fine and dandy when it isn't. So we really got to work at, and also some of us seasoned grown-ups, really, it can be a heavy lift because we're so used to isolating, and really get back in the game with this, and whatever that looks like for you, with your level of stimulation that's comfortable for you, and maybe really nudge ourselves and support our kids, teenagers, and young adults with getting back into the human connection game. And that's really it. This is Kimberly Quinn signing off from Northern Vermont. Have a mindful day.